Pam Bondi sat in her seat on the crowded flight, her back straight and her mind focused as always. The constant hum of the engines filled the air, but it barely registered in her thoughts. Pam was used to controlling her surroundings, her thoughts, her decisions. She was a prominent political figure who had built a career on confidence, authority, and unwavering resolve. She'd weathered storms of public scrutiny and emerged unscathed, unbothered by distractions. But today, in the small, cramped seat of a commercial airplane, Pam was just another passenger. The real world had taken a back seat, and she welcomed the rare chance to relax, even if just for a few hours. She gazed out the window, watching the clouds drift by, when suddenly a soft voice interrupted her peace. "Excuse me, ma'am," the girl said, her voice tentative but steady. Pam turned her head, her gaze falling upon a young girl standing next to her. No more than 8 years old, with soft curls framing her pale face, the child looked at Pam with quiet determination. "Would you mind switching seats with me? I'd love to sit by the window." Pam's lips curved into a polite but firm smile. "Sorry, I'd rather keep my seat," she responded, not giving the request another thought. But as the girl's eyes lingered on her, there was a flicker of something Pam couldn't place. A moment passed, and just as quickly as it came, the quiet feeling left. Little did Pam know that small, polite request was about to unravel everything she thought she knew about life and herself. Pam had spent most of her life navigating the demands of a high-stakes political career. As a woman in a position of power, she had learned the art of control, how to dominate conversations, how to manipulate situations to her advantage, and how to never let anyone see her vulnerable. She had to project strength, unwavering conviction at all times. Anything less would be a weakness, something to be exploited. And yet, here she was, just a passenger on an airplane. There were no speeches to make, no decisions to weigh, and no one to answer to. For a fleeting moment, Pam allowed herself to relax, her shoulders easing, her grip on her briefcase loosening, but the small girl standing next to her quickly shattered that fragile calm. The girl's unassuming presence held an odd sort of power. Pam could sense something about her that was both heartbreaking and profound, something she wasn't quite sure how to name. The girl was delicate, her frail frame wrapped in a faded sweater that looked worn and soft at the edges. Her wide eyes, dark like polished mahogany, gazed up at Pam with such intensity that Pam couldn't look away. She wasn't dressed like the usual children Pam had encountered. No bright, cheerful colors, no over-the-top accessories. She simply stood there, waiting, as though she had learned the art of patience in ways beyond her years. "Please, ma'am, I really want the window seat so I can see the birds," the girl asked again, her voice barely a whisper, but filled with a quiet sense of urgency. There was no demand in her voice, just a humble request. Pam hesitated for a moment, the faintest trace of empathy tugging at her. She glanced at the girl's face, noting how her eyes seemed to flicker with something deeper than just desire, a longing. Pam felt the soft pull of something unfamiliar, but she brushed it off. "Sweetie, I've already settled in. I'm not here to make anyone uncomfortable, but I'm afraid I can't switch seats," Pam replied, her tone calm but final. She returned her gaze to the window, as though putting an end to the conversation. But the girl's quiet persistence was like a whisper against the back of her mind, and for the first time in ages, Pam couldn't easily dismiss it. The girl, however, did not argue. Instead, she simply sat down in her seat, eyes once again turning to the window, her hands pressed gently against the glass. Pam continued to steal glances at her, unable to ignore the steady, unwavering way the girl watched the world outside. Something was different about this girl. Pam's thoughts drifted as the plane rose higher into the clouds. The girl's gaze remained fixed, her expression solemn and far removed from the typical curiosity of a child. She didn't look out at the clouds or the passing landscape. She looked beyond it, at something Pam couldn't quite understand. Pam tried to shake the feeling that had begun to settle in her chest, a vague unease she couldn't quite place. She had met thousands of people over the years, each with their own stories, their own needs. But this girl, this child, felt different. There was a quiet intensity to her, a peaceful yet unyielding determination that resonated deep within Pam. The flight continued, and Pam tried to refocus on her own thoughts. The hum of the engines should have been a comforting white noise, but the image of the girl remained. Every now and then, Pam would glance over at her. The girl's pale hands pressed gently against the window, her eyes still tracking the birds outside, as if watching them was her sole reason for being. Pam watched the girl's face, a small furrow of concern knitting her brows. There was no frantic energy, no need for attention. The girl didn't seek pity, nor did she demand sympathy. Instead, she simply existed in this quiet, steady way, as if she were a part of the flight itself, an elemental presence in a vast expanse of the sky. What could a child like that possibly be asking for? Pam wondered, what could the birds outside mean to her? In all her years of experience, all the debates, decisions, and long nights in the public eye, Pam had never encountered someone like this. Just as Pam thought she had pushed the girl's request out her mind, the girl spoke again. Her voice was barely audible above the hum of the plane, but Pam heard it as if it were spoken directly to her heart. "I need to see the birds," the girl said, her tone so gentle it almost broke Pam's resolve. "It's the last thing I want to see before I can't anymore." The words hung in the air, their simplicity making them all the more powerful. Pam turned to face her, suddenly aware of how wrong she had been. The girl wasn't asking for something trivial. She wasn't asking for a treat, a gift, or anything Pam could easily dismiss. She was asking for a window, something so small, so simple, and yet to the girl it was everything. Pam's mind raced. What did the girl mean? Before she could ask, the girl continued softly, "I'm in the final stage of cancer." Pam felt the blood drain from her face, her breath catching in her chest. "I wanted to see the birds before I can't. Before I don't get the chance." Pam's heart tightened, and the realization hit her like a wave. The girl wasn't asking for a seat. She wasn't even asking for something to make her day better. She was asking for something sacred, a moment of beauty before it slipped from her reach forever. The weight of the words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Pam, who had spent her life controlling every situation, every detail, now found herself completely helpless. The girl's quiet vulnerability, her honesty, had stripped away all of Pam's defenses. She was faced with a truth she wasn't prepared for, a child, in the final stages of her life, asking for a simple moment of peace. Pam stared at the girl, her chest tight with emotion. She felt something shift in her. Her professional persona, her carefully constructed shell, was crumbling. For the first time in what felt like forever, Pam didn't know what to do. This was not a negotiation. There was no deal to be made. The girl wasn't asking for anything she didn't deserve. For what seemed like an eternity, Pam stood frozen, unable to speak. The weight of the girl's words pressed against her chest, demanding a response, but Pam didn't know what to say. All the control she had prided herself on seemed irrelevant now. She was no longer in charge of the situation. She was simply a witness to something far greater than her. The girl, sensing Pam's hesitation, leaned a little closer, her eyes full of quiet strength. Her voice was barely a whisper, yet it cut through the air with more force than anything Pam had heard before. "I'm dying, please." Those three simple words pierced Pam's soul. The desperation, the vulnerability, the fragility of the moment all converged on Pam at once. She felt small in comparison, completely humbled. This child, this brave, quiet, gentle soul, was facing an impossible reality, and all she wanted was to see the birds outside. The emotional shift was profound. Pam's heart seemed to expand with empathy, breaking through the walls she had carefully built. She thought of all the things she had fought for, all the battles she had won, and none of them seemed to matter anymore. There was nothing more important in this moment than granting this child her simple request. Pam swallowed hard. She could feel the weight of everyone around her watching, but it didn't matter. She turned to the girl, her voice filled with sincerity and compassion. "You can have my seat," Pam said quietly. The girl's eyes widened in disbelief, her face lighting up with a smile that spoke volumes. It wasn't just gratitude, it was relief, joy, and peace all wrapped into one. Without hesitation, she moved to the window seat, her small hands pressed to the glass as she watched the birds outside, her eyes filled with wonder. The flight continued, but Pam felt a shift within herself. The noise of the plane, the bustle of the passengers, it all faded into the background. She was aware, more than ever before, of the shared humanity between the people around her. The girl, now seated by the window, seemed to glow with an inner peace that Pam couldn't help but admire. She pressed her hands against the cold glass, watching the birds soar through the sky as if they were her last connection to the world. Pam sat back in her seat, watching the girl. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so connected to someone else, so moved by the simplicity of their needs. There was no political agenda here, no public image to maintain. There was just a child, a small act of kindness, and the realization that sometimes the smallest moments can have the greatest impact. The passengers around her, some of whom had silently observed the exchange, began to smile at Pam. There was no longer any judgment or distance between them. What she had done was something no one could ignore. It wasn't about status or power. It was about compassion. Pam had made a choice that transcended all the things that usually defined her. She had chosen to see the world through someone else's eyes. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone on that plane of the beauty of human connection. As the plane began to descend, Pam stood to gather her belongings, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Before she exited the plane, she turned to the girl one last time. The girl looked at her with eyes filled with gratitude, a silent thanks that spoke more than words ever could. Pam smiled, the weight of the moment still heavy in her chest. "You're welcome," she whispered, though the girl didn't need to hear it. As Pam left the plane, she realized that in giving up a simple seat, she had received something far greater in return, a profound reminder of the power of kindness. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. We'd love to hear from you, so make sure to drop a comment below and let us know which part of the video was your favorite. Your feedback means a lot to us.